All right, guys, we're going to start this unit on genetics. So this is the first lesson of genetics. And it will be a little bit vocab heavy at the beginning, and then we'll get into stuff like Punnett squares. But we're not going to do Punnett squares today, so it's mostly just vocab. So make sure that you are taking the time to fill out that note sheet, because just the act of writing the vocab down will help you remember it. Okay, and I also got a tool that will hopefully be helpful for me so I can draw on the screen, but bear with me while I learn how to do that. Okay, so, see, I don't know how to stop drawing on the screen. Ugh, so much fun. Okay, and anyway. Okay, so originally back in the day, they thought that people inherited things or got them from their parents by blending, right? So like if there was a red flower and a blue flower, they would make a purple flower because they're blending like paint. But obviously we know now that that is incorrect, right? And the guy who sort of figured all that out, his name was Gregor Mendel. He was a monk, which is like the male version of a nun in the 1800s. And he did all these experiments with pea plants, right? And the interesting part is that he did this all before we had any idea what DNA is, so it's kind of impressive. Although there's evidence recently that he sort of like faked his numbers, but you know, so he maybe isn't all that, but his science is still good and we still use it today. His work wasn't recognized while he was alive, blah, 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 blah. But the big idea is that he showed that traits were not an even blend of parents, right? Just like you aren't an even blend of your parents. You have some traits from your mom and some traits from your dad. This is sort of like a sidebar, but to understand his experiment, we need to understand how flowers are fertilized, right? So some flowers can be see if I can make this work, self-pollinators, right? Which means that the male organs here are putting sperm into the female ovaries within the same flower, right? So they're fertilizing themselves. Whereas, can I not get this to move forward? Whereas the opposite, which is cross-pollination, you're seeing the male pollinate a different flower, right? So Mendel used cross-pollination. He wanted different male and female flowers. And this is like how he pollinated the flowers. It's not that important, but the idea, he has the pea plants, right? And they produce different colored flowers, as well as different other traits. So what he did was he took two flowers, a purple flower and a white flower, and he bred them together, right? So he did plant sex with the flowers. And the big idea is that they are parents. So they're part of this pea generation, right? So this is pea. I haven't figured out how to freeze these things. Ugh, this is going to drive me crazy. How do I get it to continue? Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to figure out how to get it to continue working. Anyway, it looks like I have to do this the whole time. We'll try and figure that out. We also have the F1 generation. F stands for filial, but the big idea here is that this is the children. So the first children are called F1, and the grandchildren, so to speak, are called the F2 generation. And it is important that we remember this P, F1, and F2, and that is on your note sheet. So make sure you fill that out and understand what that means, right? We have the parents, the first generation, right? And then the second generation. Okay, so, and what we're going to see is that within, for each gene, there are two different options, right? So we have two different alleles. Oh, crap. We have two different alleles. A dominant allele is always expressed, right? And we represent dominant with capital letters, right? You can see the capital B right here. And it means always expressed means that's what you're actually seeing in that individual. And the recessive is sort of like a hidden, right? It's a hidden trait. And they're represented with lowercase letters like little b, and they're only expressed if there are no dominant alleles. So, for example, if we look down here at this example with blue eyes and brown eyes, right? So, brown eyes is dominant, which means if there's a brown eye allele, their eyes are going to be brown, right? So, in this example, both mom and dad have given chromosomes and they both have brown, right? So we know that this person is going to have brown eyes. Whereas in this example, we have mom gave blue eyes and dad gave brown eyes. But we're still going to have brown eyes in the child because brown is dominant, right? Which means it's always expressed. The only chance of you getting blue eyes from your parents if both of your parents have blue eyes, right? Because then there is no brown allele and the only option is recessive or blue eyes. Okay. Can you stop? No. All right, my dears. I'm so sorry that I got interrupted, but here we are, back again. Okay, so once again, these are options for what you have inherited from your parents, right? So there are more options than this, but the important part to get out of this is the point that if you have one brown allele, it will override the blue, right? And you will have brown eyes. This is showing sort of how he did that with plants instead of eye color. And the idea is, okay, we can go back and talk about, so I've been saying this word allele, right? So alleles at their core are different sequences of DNA. For example, let's look at these two GG sequences, right? So let's say that this capital G means that you have brown eyes, and the lowercase g means that you have blue eyes, right? So that means you're getting the red from mom and the blue from dad. And you will have a capital G because that will override that as the dominant gene, right? But you still have these two alleles in your body, and this happens for every single gene, right? So this capital G may be like A, T, let's see if I can't text type. A, T, oh my God. I don't know how to use this tool, clearly. Okay, anyway, so this is going to have a slightly different DNA sequence than this one. And this is the DNA sequence that you're going to see expressed in your body because it is dominant, right? It is a capital letter. So you get two alleles, one from mom, one from dad, and the dominant one is the one expressed. The difference is in that DNA sequence. I know that's a little bit confusing. It's going to get clearer as we practice it a little bit more. Okay, so there are different types, right, of allele combinations, and the combination of alleles are called genotypes. These are the alleles of the organism, right? So you know you're only ever going to have two, right, because you don't have three parents. At least three biological parents. You only have two biological parents. So you're going to have two categories. You can have homozygous, right, which is two of the same allele. So that could be homozygous dominant, where you have two capital letters, right? Or that could be homozygous recessive, where you have 2 lowercase letters, right? You can also have heterozygous. That's when your parents give you 2 different alleles, right? So the capital B is from mom, maybe, and the lowercase b is from dad, and they're different. Remember that even though this is capital B, lowercase b, this will be a dominant trait because there is a capital which will override the lowercase, right? Okay. So, eventually this allele genotype, right, these different genotypes that you inherit from your parents, will get turned into phenotypes. And this is a new vocabulary word as well, right? And it means the actual trait. Oh, I don't know how to freeze this, but in any case, it means that, oh, got it. Stop. Oh my god. Okay, it means that the actual trait, right? The protein that leads to that trait. So if your genotype is big B, little b, your phenotype would be brown eyes. If your genotype is big, little b, your phenotype would be blue eyes. If your genotype is big B, your phenotype is brown eyes. Is that sort of making a little bit of sense, hopefully? Right, so here we're seeing that again. In this case, we're talking, instead of eye color, we're going to talk about whether or not the P's are round or wrinkled. And so if they are capital R, they're going to be round P's, right? Which means that round is dominant. So if we get a heterozygous, where they're 2 different, that's also going to be round because you have that dominant allele, that capital R, right? Only when you have a homozygous recessive, little r, will it become wrinkled, which is the recessive trait, right? So again, genotype is the allele combination, the letters, and phenotype is the physical expression of the trait, right? What you're actually looking at. Okay. Here's another example of that, right? The idea that proteins determine phenotypes. For example, yellow, right, is based on a protein that is yellow, right? If you're round peas, that is based on a protein. You're heading back to that central idea of DNA synthesis, the DNA to RNA to protein to phenotype, right? Proteins create the traits in your body. Okay, so I think that is where we're going to end today. And next class, we're going to pick up starting to learn about Punnett squares and something called pedigrees, right? Let me just, hopefully there's not too many questions. I know it's a little bit confusing, but I really encourage you to do the homework assignment. I think that will help clear things up. It's hard, to do this particular lesson online where I can't be sure if you're getting the information or not, but the homework assignment will help a lot, and making sure you get the notes. Okay. Hope you guys are all doing well. Bye.